So, if I had been here a year earlier, I would have been here when your restaurant was. Crowdsourcing and kickstarting and all that kind of stuff, but I came to UNCG back in 2018, and that's about when you opened at the same time. And the heart and the spirit of what Kathryn's restaurant, which is Shades and Ace, by the way, on Elm Street, right there on the corner of Gate City and real close, the Gate City and Elm, across from Mellow Mushroom. And if you haven't eaten their breakfast, lunch, go. But the spirit of what they do and the heart of your work, of course, spoke to me and my background in education and accessibility. So a little bit about Kathryn.
The chocolate croissants, by the way, if that's all you do is go get a chocolate croissant.
The funniest thing is they're not made.
We get those from Camino Bakery.
Yeah,
They're
so good.
But
a lot of the other
others,
businesses, I highly recommend, yeah. So owner and chef, when I get to see you there. At Shay. And also a UNCG alumni. And at one point had this huge banner downtown. I was like, I know her. She is a disability integration coach, which she will speak about more. Last year, we do a kind of a department reads. Every year we pick a different topic. So for this particular year, we were speaking about neurodivergence, neurodifferences, which is an area that's very close to my heart. And I went, oh, I know who we can bring in. And so I got to see the back rooms of Shay. I felt very special. It's been 4 years. And so I spoke to Kathryn and one of the books that we're reading for our department reads, she had directly recommended. And I found another one that was more kind of like tech and neurodivergence, which I told you about. And so she's going to speak more about her disability integration coach work. And then these are things I didn't actually know because I mean, well, I know you, but I don't, this work on a professional basis. Like play ultimate frisbee, walking her deaf dog Avery. I did not know Avery was deaf. And taking day trips to bigger cities, the mountains, or the coast, because I guess you're busy and you can't take like week-long trips. So please welcome Kathryn. And I'm so excited.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be with you here this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to come back to campus and to get to see people here. So thanks for spending some time with me today. Before I jump in and tell you a little bit more about myself and about my business, I would just love to hear from you. If there's something in particular that you were really hoping to get out of the time today, I would love to know that so that I can keep it in mind as you go. And then also just know that this is meant to be interactive. It's not just sit here and listen to me for the next hour and a half, because that would not be very interesting. I'll be asking for reflection and for your thoughts as we go, but also feel free to raise your hand, jump in. We are going to learn best together by actually creating some dialogue around the topic and not just listening to me. So also keep that in mind. So that being said, what do you want to learn today? Why are you here? Why is this interesting? Yeah.
So I teach some K-12 teachers and some corporate learning and development space people. And so I think about communication and support needs for folks with different disabilities, both for myself and my students, but also to help teach them, so that when they engage with their learners, they can use those same kind of communication and supports.
Great. Awesome. Yeah.
I've had a number of advisees over the years that are on the neurodiversity spectrum, should I say. And I struggle the most with their job search and how they present themselves to employers. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to come today, since you are an employer and you know what the challenges are.
Yes, and that's something that I'm really passionate about and that we'll talk about today, because my hope really in the work that I'm doing is that we change the way employers view their applicants and that they're willing to expand their way of thinking in terms of disability and neurodiversity, because it's really not fair to ask a person with a disability to continue to try to mask harder or become more undisabled as possible in order to get a job. That's not really the goal. That's not where our world is at today, which is why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So we'll talk about some of both of that.
Well, and sort of building on that, since that's not where our world is at
Yep.
today, one of my struggles is how do I create an inclusive learning environment where I'm still pushing my students out of the nest and telling them, I'm sorry, I know this is hard, but the world isn't going to listen to you. So how do we move beyond that? And that's something I'm interested in.
Somewhat similar, of course, building course designs that are enriching for all of my students, making sure that I'm doing universal design to aid my students in their learning. But a question from my students, trying to make sure that everything, is available and accessible in the online learning environment, but also as they move into the workforce, what sort of support is out there for them, and also how to be an advocate for that support when they move into the workforce, because people may not know what they don't know.
Right.
But how do we educate? But also, sometimes we have to speak up for ourselves.
Yes.
We may not want to, we may not feel we should have to,
Yes.
and sometimes we do.
Yeah.
And so how we can integrate that into the work that we do.
Yeah, that's great. What things you're curious to hear today before we get started? Right, we're gonna dive in. I do have some worksheets down here, just if you want something to make notes on. So if you do, feel free to come up and grab one, or if someone wants to pass them back, you can do that as well. Also, feel free throughout this session, if you need to stand up, if you need to stretch, if you need to move around, if you need more food, feel free to do that too. This is I want you to get something out of it, but there's also, I want there to be a comfort level as we go, and definitely take care of yourself. All right, so before we get into kind of the meat of our content for today, I'm just going to briefly introduce myself and my business, because that informs why I'm here today and why I'm talking about the things that I'm talking about, and why I have some credentials to do that. So, like was already said earlier, my business is called Chez Jeunesse, which is a French-inspired cafe. We are downtown, across from Mellow Mushroom. I'm hoping at some point it switches and people say, "Oh, Mellow Mushroom's right across from Chez Jeunesse." But that is the most helpful landmark as of now. We opened in October of 2018, so we will be 6 years old next month, which is a little bit hard to believe. Chez Jeunesse is French for the place of Genesis, or the place of new beginnings, which is what we hope to be. This is what our space looks like on the inside. We're a small cafe. We have about 40 seats. We have about 140 plants. So we have more plants than we do seats. But that's a really important part of our aesthetic. And we do breakfast and lunch every day. We're open every day from 8 to 2. And we're known mostly for our brunch on the weekends. So if you want to come in and grab a seat quickly, do that during the week. If you don't mind a little bit of a wait and you want the energy of the weekend rush, then that's your time. Okay, a little bit about me. I am a self-titled disability integration coach, which is something that I made up for myself because after being in this work for the past 6 years, it felt like saying the owner and chef of Chez Jeunesse didn't fully encompass what it is that I'm trying to do. I was like, what am I trying to do? And recognizing that I don't see a lot of other people doing what I'm trying to do. And so there wasn't already a name or title that I felt like fit for me. And so this, as of now, is what I've come up with. But what that means is that I'm a non-disabled human who's really committed to breaking down my own bias and to expanding my understanding around disability and what disability employment specifically looks like in our world. And then I'm practicing that and living that out on a daily basis with my team. So I have an integrated work team, which means out of the 30 to 35 teammates that I have, about 50% are disabled and 50% are non-disabled. And it's been that way since we opened 6 years ago. So we are walking out that process of integration on a daily basis and figuring out what that looks like and continuing to grow deeper in our own understanding of what a true team environment looks like. And then my hope is to take what we're learning and to bring that back out into the world and to coach and to work with other businesses and organizations who are wanting to make their spaces more inclusive, which is why I'm here today. I've lived in Greensboro for about 14 years, but I didn't grow up here. I was born in Southern California, and then my family moved to Boone, North Carolina when I was 7. So I grew up a couple hours from here in the mountains. I moved to France for a year in my early 20s, and I cooked and lived in the Burgundy region of France and fell in love with French food and culture, which is why we are a French-inspired restaurant. I wanted to bring kind of the spirit of hospitality that I experienced in France back to the US. Moved from France to Greensboro to go to UNCG and studied hospitality management here. Had previously gotten my associates in culinary through a community college. And then while I was at UNCG, I started working with the Autism Society of North Carolina, which led to a job in Guilford County School Systems for a couple years after I graduated in a special education class. And then during that season of my life, really was trying to figure out, what do I want to do with my life? And it was daydreaming, like legitimately daydreaming. And I was like, if I could have any, job in the world, what would it be? And thought almost immediately, like I would open up a restaurant that gave people either a first step into the workforce or a second chance. It stayed kind of broad for a while, and it also stayed a daydream for a while. And then after keeping it kind of in my head for probably about a year, I started talking about it out loud to friends and family. And then in that process was like, oh, maybe this isn't a daydream, maybe this is an actual dream. And then I was like, if this is an actual dream, what do I need to do to try to make it happen? And so from there, it was probably another 5 or 6 years at least of pursuing the work experience that I felt like I needed, writing a business plan, trying to figure out the funding, trying to figure out and narrow in on the concept, which at that point, it then became working with adults with disabilities. Then it became studying other businesses and organizations who were employing people with disabilities to see what I liked and what I didn't like, and taking notes, traveling some to do that, trying to find a space, all of those things. And then ended up opening up 6 years ago in October. So it's been quite an adventure since then. The restaurant industry is not an easy industry to be in. And we were 15 months old when the pandemic hit. So that was an added element, an added obstacle to try to overcome. The Greensboro community has been really amazing in supporting us through opening, through a pandemic, through coming out of a pandemic. And we wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. So the community aspect of who we are and what we do is something that we value a lot. All right, any questions about me or Chez Jeunesse before we move forward? I forgot to say this, but this is an important part of my story too. I have 3 cousins with autism. So grew up with autism in family and interacting with family members with disabilities from a really young age. So I think that has always felt really comfortable to me. It's just felt like part of my life. And then as they've grown, like we're fairly close in age, so they're all in their 30s now. As they were going through high school and then college and then graduating and looking for work and seeing some of the barriers that they were facing and some of the injustices, that also sparked a lot of the thought process for getting this business started. All right, so why specifically do I do this work? I believe that belonging is a fundamental right and that humans function better together. And when seen as whole individuals, disabled humans are often left out and not included into our world and workplaces. And I want to change that. As we get going, this is just a friendly reminder that respect and kindness are foundational to this session. We are here to learn together, and this is not a space where you feel like you have to know what to say or how to say it before you ask a question. Please don't intimidate yourself. We're here to learn. But if at any point something felt like it was blatantly disrespectful or unkind to someone else in the room or to disability in general, then I would address it in the moment so that this can continue to be a safe space for all of us. But just know that I'm here to learn too. Anytime I do a session, people ask questions. I'm like, that's a great question. I hadn't thought about that before. And so my work that I do coming into these workshops is that I'm coming in with a posture of openness. I'm here to learn from you too. So my goal is to not get defensive or feel insecure about I didn't know something and I'm supposed to know it because I'm standing up here in front of you. So my goal is to also enter into that learning with you, but hope that you can engage in that with me as well. So all of that being said, today we're going to talk about bias, which is not something that people usually want to talk about because it feels uncomfortable. But bias is a barrier to belonging, because when we're biased, whether that's positively towards someone or negatively towards someone, we're coming in with our preconceived ideas about who that person is, and we're holding ourselves back from getting to know who they really are, which limits the connection and the communication that we're able to have. So if our goal in the long run is to create a space and a world for all people to belong, then that starts with starting to do the internal work of breaking down the bias that we hold. So that's going to be a consistent theme as we go today. We're going to talk a lot about language around disability and how that's changed and where things are at currently. And you'll see in a lot of that biases that we've held culturally. And the hope is that we can start to break some of that down together. All right. Any other questions or thoughts before we get rolling into some language? We're feeling okay so far? On the same page? Okay, great. All right. This is not going to be a how-to workshop. Unfortunately, we are going to talk about some basic principles, but every person with a disability is different. So there's no one size fits all. There's not a here's the checklist and I'm going to tell you these things and then you're good to go. But I'm going to try to give you some things to get your wheels turning and for you to think outside the box. Hopefully equip you with some language and some tools so you feel more comfortable engaging in conversation, and then that continues to develop and grow. But it's going to be, just know, you're signing up for this, you're signing up to do it probably not for the long haul, because it's not something that's a quick fix. We're breaking down some systemic biases, which takes a while. And things are going to continue to evolve and change. So if you have me back 5 years from now to teach this same workshop, we're going to be talking about some different things, because there are going to be different things that have happened in our world. So we're going to start with a basic definition of disability, just so that we're coming at things from a similar place today. I'm going to give you two different definitions, but the first one comes from this book, which is the book that I think Heather was referring to earlier, called Demystifying Disability. It's a great resource if you don't already have it. It's not a very big book. As you can see, it's pretty compact, so it's a really great and easy resource, and the author is disabled. And the definition that she holds of disability is that disability is a state of being, a natural part of the human experience. What do we like about that definition? What stands out to you? Or is there anything that you don't like about it? Yes.
It reminds me of a talk that I went to many years ago about this same topic, and the speaker stood up and said, at some point in our lives, we are all disabled. And it just, that always rings with me, because if I didn't have these glasses on, I wouldn't be able to see.
Yeah.
If I have had knee issues and had to, navigate finding ways into buildings that are not properly done.
Yeah.
It's all of these different things happen to all of us at different times in our lives. And so it's a natural part of the human experience. It's not those people and me.
Yes.
It's, part of everybody's life.
Yeah. What else? Yes.
I think that normally there's some thinking.
Yeah. The natural part. Yeah, there's not this polarization, right? Of there's a non-disabled person is normal and a disabled person is abnormal, or a non-disabled person is typical and a disabled person is atypical, right? Like the natural part, I also really appreciate. What else? Anything that we don't like about it? Yeah.
I mean, you read the comment and online with the street, the state.
Uh-huh.
Don't know what it describes.
Yes.
You don't even tell what it describes by don't specify.
Yes. Yes.
Not yours.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And that was something, for the most part, when I do this, people are like, no, we really like this definition. And then I had a group this week that was like, this is not helpful because it doesn't tell me what disability actually is. And so I'm going to give you a secondary definition that's a little bit more specific. But the reason that I like this and why I use this first is because it's written in very neutral language, which is oftentimes not the case when people talk about disability. A lot of positivity or negativity starts to come into play, and we attach some sort of morality to disability, which doesn't need to be there. So I really like the fact that it's neutral. I do like the fact that it removes the idea that there's a norm and then an abnormal. And that it includes disability within the human experience instead of placing it outside of it. So that being said, I'm going to read you the definition that the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the law in America that protects people with disabilities, their definition of disability, which is a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a history or record of such an impairment, such as cancer that is in remission, or is perceived by others as having such an impairment, such as a person who has scars from a severe burn. If a person falls into any of these categories, the ADA protects them, and because the ADA is a law and not a benefit program, you do not need to apply for coverage. So, that gives a little bit more language and is a slightly more specific, I think, as to what disability is, but is also still kind of vague, which I think is actually really helpful because then that covers a broader base of people. There is still an element of a person with a disability has some autonomy over that decision for themselves. I think the fact that it says, that impacts or impairs a significant life function, that may vary a little bit from person to person, and that's okay. Or perceived by someone else. It's like, that's also going to vary from person to person. So the good thing about that is it actually protects a lot more people than if it was super specific. Not that that is always the way that it plays out in our world, but at its core, I think that's what it's intended to do. And something else I need to think about, and this is, I wasn't quick enough in the workshop the other day to think of this when someone was like, this isn't helpful because it doesn't tell me what disability actually is. My follow-up question to that, now that I've had a chance to think about it more, is, but why does that matter? Why are we getting stuck on that? If I need to know exactly what it is in order to accept the definition, which I think is, again, why I like the state of being aspect of this definition. And I need to do some digging down into that question a little more because it only hit me yesterday, but it's something I've been thinking about. So to give you another definition of neurodiversity and neurodivergence, because you'll hear me use both today, and you've probably heard an increase in the use of neurodiversity or neurodivergence in the past several years. There are some differences. The two terms are not totally interchangeable, although there is some overlap. Disability is a medical and a legal classification. So a disability diagnosis is what's protected under the ADA. Neurodiversity is a social concept. So it's not a diagnosis. It's not a legal term, at least not in our society yet. And it also hasn't been around for very long. It was a concept coined by a sociologist in the 1990s. Her name is Judy Singer. And the idea behind neurodiversity and neurodivergence is to accept and celebrate the fact that all brains are different and unique, and encourages us to understand more about brains that are different from our own. So at its base, it actually also removes this idea that there's a normal brain and an abnormal brain. The way that neurodiversity is used mostly doesn't reinforce that idea. So I think there's still room for that term and that concept to grow. A lot of times when I hear people refer to neurodivergence, it still is with this idea that there's a normal brain. And if you're not a normal brain, then you identify as being a neurodivergent brain. So I love the concept as a whole. And I think there's a lot of room for it culturally. I also still think that there's some room for how we understand it and use it, but just know those differences. Questions about disability and neurodiversity?
I always thought of neurodiversity as autism, but a different spectrum of it, and not maybe diagnosed.
Yeah, so neurodiversity being more of a social concept, a lot of times is something that people self-identify with, and not something that's diagnosed. Autism, someone with autism could say that they're neurodivergent if they want to take that identity on for themselves, but they don't have to. But because it's neuro, everything that neurodiversity is talking about has to do with your brain. And that's also a difference between disability and neurodiversity. Is disability is going to cover all aspects of disability. So that's going to be physical, it's going to be mental. Whereas neurodiversity is specifically talking about what's going on in our brain. So again, there's some people who identify as being neurodiverse may also fall under the disability umbrella, and vice versa, but they won't always.
I've heard conditions like OCD included under neurodiversity.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so there's, ADHD.
Right.
So it's a lot of other things as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where, again, there's some flexibility and freedom and autonomy for a person to decide how they identify. And so someone may identify as being disabled and neurodiverse. Someone may identify as being neurodiverse, but not say that they have a disability. Some of that is up to the person. And so you'll hear probably a mix of both. But just know, like, the key differences are disability, medical and legal classification, and encompassing to all disabilities, and neurodiversity, social concept, and is only talking about the brain. So there are 4 areas of life that we all experience as humans, which is our mind, our body, our emotions, and our social interactions. Disability occurs when at least one of these areas is impacted, whether that's at birth or later in life. So, like we already talked about just a little bit earlier, disability could happen at any point. No human is immune from disability. It could happen at any point of your life. It could happen suddenly. It could be something that happens over time. But it's going to start when at least one of these areas is touched or impacted, which oftentimes will then, because we're very holistic beings, touch on or impact other areas as well. But at least it's going to start with one. So that could be that someone has an intellectual or developmental disability, and then that also impacts their social interactions and then their emotions. But it started or originated in one area, or someone may have a physical disability, which then could also impact their mental health or their emotional health. But it's, again, going to start in one spot. Questions about that? You feel like we're kind of on the same page about what disability is and the terms around it. Disability is not a bad word. So you're going to hear me say hello. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about language and break things down a little bit further. Why does language matter? We have a lot of language teachers in this room, which is amazing. Why is language important?
It's what you want, but what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. The easiest. Yeah. Can everybody hear in the back what's being said? Do you want me to repeat anything? You're good? Okay. Go for it. We got 2 people.
Okay, language is a necessity. Communicating necessity.
Yes.
It may help if you repeat for.
You will need to
Oh,
repeat
sure.
because it's recording.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna repeat briefly for the recording. So it's a necessity. It's how we communicate. It's how we get our opinions across. What else?
It's a way to express that.
It's a way to express ourselves. Yes. To be a part of something. Yeah, there's that social aspect of it, right? What else?
Possibly other generations to that. Using language, right?
Yes. Yeah, so you're taking something that's in the present and we can actually document that through language and then pass that on to other generations. Yes.
To pick up on, these are all lovely, but to pick up on the more negative side, it's how we other people. We
Yeah,
make them different from us and somehow less than or unsettling or whatever.
sure. Language can be cruel too, right? We can tear down others with our words and with our language too. Yeah.
Language is how you understand your surroundings.
Yes. Yeah. How we understand our surroundings.
I think it's very much part of our identity. So what language we speak, how we speak,
Yeah.
you know, our accents, all of that combines to create some part of our identity.
Sure. So language is part of our identity. Yeah. And our culture too. Great. So the reason that we're going to focus on language today is for all of those reasons. And because there can be a breakdown in language and communication too, right? What I'm saying and what I'm hoping to convey may not necessarily be what you're understanding or you're picking up from me, right? And a lot of times that happens when we're not operating with the same definitions of words, or we don't understand where those words and the meanings came from initially. And so the reason that we're talking about that in terms of disability today is because language has changed historically around disability. There's been a lot of negativity that's been attached to disability and disability related terms for a long time. And we're trying to break that down, but what we're not wanting to do is to just change the word. Because if we change the word and we don't actually talk about the bias or the meaning that was attached to it, then we have a tendency to pull the bad parts of history into the current and then pass them on into the future, because we're not actually changing the way that we think about something. We're not changing the way that we feel about something. We're just changing a word, which ultimately then means we're not changing the way we're really talking or communicating about it either. So we're going to dig into some meaning and some understanding and then what terminology actually is. In disability culture, there is something called person-first language and identity-first language. You may already be familiar with that. So if you are, does anyone want to tell me what person-first language is? Yes.
Person first language is where you're focusing on the person instead of the idea of the disability.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is a person in a wheelchair, it is a person on the spectrum, as opposed to the language is led by identity first.
Yeah, exactly. So the person precedes the disability incentive structure, which a couple examples are here. So a person with autism or a person with a disability. Identity first language is where that disability is incorporated into the identity statement for the person. So an autistic person or a disabled person. Both are appropriate and reasonable to use. People with disabilities prefer both for different reasons. So we're going to talk about both, and you probably already heard me use both today. And you'll continue to hear me do that because I have people on my team who prefer both. But person first language, what do you think the primary arguments for person first language are? Reasons people would prefer it.
It puts the person first.
It puts the person first.
It shouldn't be known by whatever is, like, I prefer not to be known as an old person. It's older.
Yeah. What else?
If identifies language with the disability of autism is a whole person. But it's person first, he is a person, human being, and autism is a part of him, not doesn't identify him.
Yes,
It gives advantage.
Yes.
To be a human being. It doesn't restrict him in autism or in disability.
yes,
So
yes. So, you all are correct. Those are the primary reasons why people prefer person first language. I'm gonna take all of that and I'm gonna flip it on its head with you. So, everything that you said is correct. Those are all amazing arguments. And there also is still some bias attached to it. So, we're gonna use me as an example. What are some identifiers that you could use to describe me based on things you've heard me say today or based on ways that I look? What could you say about me? I'm a chef. What else?
Person with brown hair.
I'm a person with brown hair. What else?
Coach.
Entrepreneur. What'd you say?
a coach.
A coach. Yes.
French culture enthusiast.
French culture enthusiast. Thank you very much. I like that one.
Fancy.
Thank you. Great. What else?
A person who likes plants.
I'm a person who likes plants. I'm a presenter. Yes.
Person with tattoos.
I'm a person with tattoos.
Awesome.
That don't wear plants. Yes. Keeping the themes consistent over here. Yeah. I'm white. I'm a woman. I am average height, right? Maybe a little bit tall. I don't know. But all of those things are identity statements about me. Now, if I came to you and I said, hi, I'm Kathryn, I'm a brunette. Would you think that that means I have now told you everything you need to know about me? No. Or if I said, I'm a chef, that's also an identity statement. Would you assume that that's all encompassing to who I am as a person? No. So, but somehow when it comes to disability, when someone says, hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm autistic, we think, oh, great, I now know everything I need to know about you, right? Hence, the feeling of we want to use person first language because we won't want to say that you are your disability. You're more than your disability. But someone should be able to use identity first language and for us to still be able to understand that same concept, right? Someone can say, I'm autistic, I'm disabled. That's a piece of information about who they are. It is not all of who they are. And it's important that we be able to make that distinction and not project or place then an idea of who they are because they're giving us one identifier, right? So I want to encourage us to think about it in those terms. The disability is just like any of those things that you just listed about me. It's part of who someone is. It's not all of who someone is. And just like those identifiers that you gave me, some of them impact my life more than others, right? The fact that I have a plant tattoo doesn't impact my life much at all. The fact that I'm an entrepreneur does impact my life quite a bit. So someone, and this is going to change from person to person, some disabilities may impact their lives more than disabilities impact someone else's life, but each person gets to have their own story and should get to have the right and the freedom to tell their story and to talk about that level of impact if they want to, without non-disabled humans just making an assumption about who they are based on the disclosure. That being said, people with disabilities still prefer both, and for different reasons. So a great way to kind of walk through that is that if someone does disclose to you that they have a disability, that can be an open door to just ask some follow-up or some clarifying questions. Be like, thanks so much for telling me. Do you like to talk about your disability? And they might be like, no, I don't. I just wanted to let you know. And be like, okay, great. You don't have to talk about it anymore. If they say, yeah, I really do. Like, it's part of my life and I like talking about it. Thanks for asking. Then you could not fidget with that. Then you can ask some follow-up questions like, how do you like to talk about your disability? Do you prefer person first language or identity first language? Sometimes people will give you a really clear answer. Oh yes, I prefer person first language for these reasons, or I really only like identity first language. A lot of times I've heard people be like, I don't really care so long as you're nice to me. So you're gonna get a range of answers, but again, that's because every person is different and their experience is different. And some people are going to probably tell you that disclosing disability has not benefited them in the past, it's harmed them. And so that's an area where you can build trust and safety if someone would like to talk about it more. Other people are very open about it. Some people are really proud and want to talk a lot about it. But taking your cue from the person with a disability is always the place to start, and know that they don't have to disclose. And there's a little bit of a catch there because some disabilities are visible and some are invisible, and people with visible disabilities don't have the same freedom to disclose or not. And that complicates it a little bit, but it's still their life and their disability, and they get to decide how much they want to talk about it. Any questions about that or thoughts before you go?
I have a question. Now, if a person is not able to express
Yes,
what kind of disability,
yeah,
but last time, because yesterday I was going to Autodrome to get tool.
sure.
Now, the encountered a man was addressing me for help. In the meantime, on the form that I just selected the tool, it was over there and checked on computer and it was over there. I was not able to find it. Just in the middle of conversation, I realized that he was not really able to find it on the shelves.
Okay.
And the other gentleman, an old man, really had a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
pulled the ladder, went up and get the tool.
Mhm.
But, I was just, in the middle of something that didn't know how to address that person in the meantime.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't able to express, what his hardship was, but because he told me that it wasn't available. And I just told him nicely, can I come later when it is available?
Yeah.
And the other gentleman found it, gave it, and put it in the computer. I paid for it. And then I, thanked both of them. And I'm still feeling from yesterday on, no, I really didn't do, much for this gentleman who was really trying to, but not really able to express what the hardship was. I really don't know. Still, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So to kind of, I think, try to sum that up just a little bit, that awkward feeling when you understand that someone may be hitting a barrier and you're not exactly sure what to do with that information, especially if either they're not able to verbally express that to you, or maybe they feel uncomfortable expressing that. I want to coin a term called help consent in our world, which is this happens a lot around disability, where sometimes we just assume that someone can't do something. And so then there's this pull as a non-disabled person to just step in and help. And I think there's still room there to have dialogue with someone, and to ask, is there something that I can help you with? Or is there a better way that I can support you right now? And give someone the opportunity to either say yes or no. Again, sometimes verbal communication is possible and sometimes it isn't. So thankfully, verbal communication isn't the only communication that there is, and body language says a lot too. So in those moments, I think being willing to be patient and do the best that you can to understand what someone is communicating with their body language is a great place to start. But by and large, I usually give people, or work to give people, the benefit of the doubt that you can do this without my help. You don't need the support. And that if it seems like a roadblock is really being hit, to ask or engage, is there a way that I could help you? Or in your case, you could say, would it be possible to have somebody else also do a double check behind you just to make sure? And then if not, I can come back later when it is available. Like, those would be appropriate questions to ask anybody, disability or not, if you're not a store.
My case, actually, the other gentleman in the county was already helping.
Yeah.
He was so nice, but still I was feeling that the other, young man was not feeling, okay with it.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be a better way, to help him.
Right.
Because he went to the other computer, put it on.
Yeah.
And while I was watching, I just said, how did he feel about this one?
Right,
So it's not really nice, and maybe he should come to the same computer and let's do it together.
yes.
Maybe
Or
it's
even
together.
give him the benefit of the doubt and come to the computer and say, hey, can you walk me through what you just did so that I can see what steps you took? And then if you walk through, be like, oh, actually right there, we need to click this instead, like
Yeah.
provide that feedback in real time. But not just assume that he did it wrong or that there's no chance for him to learn, like that could have been a learning experience for both of them. But yes, kind of stepping in and engaging instead of just like, I'll do it for you, which oftentimes happens. Yes.
My first language is kind of like disrespectful.
Using like the person first language?
I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why? Because my country, we use one word. For example, for disabled person, we use anti-copy. I mean, when you say anti-copy, the person feel like you disrespect
Okay.
him or her.
Yeah.
So, they prefer, to use like a person with a disability, in person anti-copy. Like, it's a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that because definitely the information I'm giving you today is based on American English and what rules are in this country. Does not necessarily mean it applies worldwide. So I'm really glad that you said that.
I will add what Robinson said.
Yeah.
In Sri Lanka also, we are not supposed to use disabled.
Uh-huh.
So we use differently abled.
Yeah.
Just to way of respecting them and.
Yes, and we knowledge is always trying to stay a person with special needs.
Yes. So those are all things that we're going to talk about now, which are called disability euphemism. So the information, yes.
What is the most common practice in the US? I believe for 25 years, I'm still kind of confused right now. Which one do you most, in the general public, more than maybe in academia, maybe in research?
Yes.
Which one of those two, person first or identity first, is most commonly used? And what should we be aware of, when, for example, what circumstances you should probably
Right.
avoid this type of language with this type of formulation?
Yeah. Great question. In terms of what is preferred culturally, what you'll see a lot of is that parents of children with disabilities and people who are in education oftentimes lean towards person first language, and people who are disabled oftentimes lean towards identity first language. That is something that's changed more recently because you have kids. A lot of diagnoses have changed in a very short period of history, like our learning about autism, our learning of ADHD, our learning of Down syndrome and cerebral palsy, and there are a lot of different disabilities. Like our understanding around all of those things has grown and changed a lot, even just in my lifetime. So what we're kind of seeing is that kids who are diagnosed with a disability when they were young, their parents used person first language. And as those kids have gotten older and have been able to speak for themselves, have said, I'm fine with my disability, or I'm proud of it. I don't need you to separate it out from who I am. Like I'm fine to claim that, and have leaned more towards identity first. So you'll kind of see that sometimes it falls into different camps. Again, that's not always the case. There's going to be some of both in each camp, but that's one trend, I guess you could say, that I've noticed. There are some that only fall into one or the other. So if it is a medical diagnosis, like a person with Down syndrome, a person with cerebral palsy, that's going to fall into person first always. You're not going to say a Down syndrome person. You're not going to make that identity first. And then the deaf community in particular usually prefers identity first, and pretty passionately so. There's a lot of pride in the deaf community. So you'll hear most people who are deaf will identify themselves that way instead of saying a person with hearing loss or a person with deafness. Like no, I'm deaf, I'm proud of it, I'm a deaf person. There's kind of a claim in that. So those are distinctions to be made, but you'll probably hear a difference generationally in terms of person first and identity first. So disability euphemisms. Again, I'm coming at this from a US perspective. Some of you have mentioned that that's preferred, that the euphemism is what's preferred in your culture. These are areas, well, I should go back one, hold on. What is a euphemism, first of all? Someone like to define it for me. Yeah.
People that they are special,
Uh-huh.
like special people and they are people.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna talk about that, yeah.
Euphemism is a supposedly a nicer way of talking about something that's negative, like
Yeah.
a nice word for dying.
Exactly, right? So when we use a euphemism, we're talking around something instead of talking directly about it. It's a, feel free, if you gotta leave it to a group, go for it. Thanks so much for being here today. Yeah, it's a nicer way to say something, or it's sometimes metaphorical, right? I'm gonna let them leave and then we'll keep going so that we don't try to do too many things at one time. I'm like, my brain's not gonna do great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not country, we don't know how to deal with disability. So I have a question.
yeah.
As we are educators, how can educators adapt their teaching strategies to accommodate neurodiverse learners in classroom?
Yeah, I wish I could tackle that in the like 10 seconds that you walk out the door. I would say step number one is listen to disabled voices. So there's, especially with the internet, there's great YouTube channels, there's great podcasts, there's great Instagram accounts to follow. So start searching for that, hear what disabled people have to say about their own experience, and then incorporate some of that. Yeah. And this book is a good one to start with if you want, it's a helpful resource.
I'll write it down and I'll share it.
Great, thank you. Thanks for being here. Our faculty that's in the back, would you like to stay back there or do you want to move up? I feel like we have this like bridge between us now, but you're welcome if you feel more comfortable back there to hang out.
Troublemakers, that's it.
We'll be back here on the fringe.
Keep other interests.
Thank you. That's a hefty question. You help us on the education. Okay, so euphemism, quick recap, is a nicer way to say something that we usually have negative connotations about. It can sometimes be metaphorical. But these are the big areas in our culture that we typically use euphemisms. So give me some examples. What are some euphemisms for sex or death or body functions and fluids?
Passed away.
Passed away.
Unalived.
Unalive.
Oh, I am not kidding. That's the term on social media these days. Unalived.
Unalive.
Yeah, and it's a very common term if someone has, committed suicide. They
Okay,
have unalived themselves.
okay,
Oh. Yeah.
With Jesus.
with Jesus, yeah,
Let's lighten things. Knocking the boots.
knocking the boots, yeah,
They've gone to the angels.
gone to the angels.
You see where.
We use a lot of euphemisms in the South. We love to talk around things in the South.
Oh, yes.
What else? What? They went to the farm, yep, especially if it's a dog that's died.
Across the Rainbow Bridge. I mean, it
Across the
depends
Rainbow
on,
Bridge.
you know, what it is that has passed. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, what about sex or body functions and fluids?
Knocking the boots was for
Knocking boots with sex, I did know that one, yeah, then we went right back to death,
Had to make water,
had to make water.
drop the kids off at the pool. I don't know. I probably was-
Yeah, those are great, yeah.
Remember, I taught middle school for 11 years. I could go for a while.
Time of the month, right?
Oh, yeah.
Ant flow,
The change,
the
the
change,
crimson tide.
sleeping with, right? Hanky panky, yep,
A lady of ill repute.
special hug, yeah. A what?
Lady of ill repute.
Yeah, good. So those are all euphemisms that we use in these areas, and we use euphemisms oftentimes in these categories because we feel really uncomfortable or like there's something wrong talking about sex or death or body functions or fluids, which, yes,
was also there's like there's also the opposite of like super technical terms, like when you go to the doctor.
Yeah,
And like there's like super like technical jargony terms for the same things that like serve the same purpose, right? Like we don't want to like talk in plain language about your genitals.
Yeah.
You know, genitals or whatever it is, like. So it's like the same sort of function. And I think I bring that up too, because I think that some of the things happen with disability, right? Where it's like,
yes,
there's euphemisms, but it's also like super technical jargony terms too.
yeah, that's a great distinction. Euphemisms sometimes can be helpful, sometimes they can be humorous. They can also, I think, sometimes be harmful because it limits the education and the understanding that we actually have around something, especially a lot of times we use euphemisms around kids. So it's like, oh, it's not appropriate to talk about this. Like I have a lot of memories of kids where I was like, well, then I was just confused because I knew something was important, but you're not really telling me what it is. And then it's like, I shouldn't be hearing this, but now I'm curious, but now I don't know what it is. Like it just leads to a lot of, can lead to shame, it can lead to confusion. But there's also an element of not being able to really convey the feeling or the emotion behind something when you're using a euphemism that I also think can be damaging. I think that especially in the area of death, where sometimes we try to make it sound like it's this rosy, happy, fine thing that's not a big deal. And it's like, someone might be really sad and grieving because they actually lost someone, and we don't feel like we can just say that. And I think that holds us back culturally. So the same happens when we use euphemisms around disability. By using euphemisms, we're communicating most of the time subconsciously that there's something wrong with disability. We can't talk about it. There's something wrong with you if you have a disability, so we don't want to talk about it. So instead, we use a lot of these terms like special needs or differently abled, handy-capable, challenged, someone's challenged, or as a person with challenges. EC is used in the school system for exceptional children. Or like someone said earlier, was it you who said that special? No, it was someone else. A lot of times special needs gets abbreviated just to special. Usually that just means someone's weird, right? If we're like, oh, they're so special, or that was really special, but it derives still from this idea of special needs, which comes from disability. So this kind of attempt of we're wanting to say it in a nicer way really does a disservice by saying there's something wrong with it or bad with it in the first place, which is not true. So that kind of goes back to that initial definition that we had of disability, which is very neutral. It's not a morality statement. There's no positivity or negativity assigned to it. And someone with a disability may decide for themselves that it has impacted them positively or negatively, but they get to be the ones to say that. There's not something inherently negative or positive about disability. There's a lot of negativity that our world holds around it, but in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with it. Questions or thoughts or words that have been left off of this that you can think of?
So on Friday, we were discussing the first 3 chapters of the book.
Yeah.
And you brought up the discussion point of changing words.
Yes.
And how words have, changed over time. But also these terms have changed just in like the last 10 years of when I've been writing about accessibility.
Yeah.
So in scholarship, they didn't want us to use disabled. So for a while it was differently abled or special needs.
Yeah.
And we would have our documents sent back to us and go, well, you can't use these terms.
Yeah.
And so now it was, I don't know the status of anyone that was working, that I was writing under.
Yeah.
But this was kind of like the language that was being pushed. And so I don't know if these were fully able-bodied or, it's, but that was, so when you have the directions from, the disabled community, that this is the language we prefer, but then, the research community is like, well, no, this is what you need to put, because this is what they
Yeah.
really
Well,
want.
let me tell you how it is. Right. I mean, I do think there's some room there for pushback in education to happen. I feel like I do that somewhat regularly in my line of work where people send me things. That's actually one of the things we're going to do at the end is a document that someone sent me last summer. And I was like, here's this great thing that's happening. Share it with your team. And I read it through and I was like, hi. there's some really, like, not okay language and wording in this document, and I marked it up and highlighted it and was like, here are my thoughts, like, I'm gonna send it back and then there was, some dialogue that happened around that, and it is oftentimes I get it in both non-disabled culture and disability culture. Usually where I get the misapplication of words within the disability community, oftentimes then it still is a generational thing, and it's parents who are promoting something for their kids and the language that they're using really oftentimes still reinforces, I think, their own emotional place of having a kid who is diagnosed with a disability and not being sure what to do with that, and how that was handled for them internally, and then how that got projected on to their kid. And we see that in the culture too. Maybe they felt like there was something wrong with their kid, or their kid never fit in, or it was really scary, and those can be real things, I think, for parents to experience and to go through, but it makes it really hard when that gets pushed back onto the kids to hold, and then that gets spilled over into culture too. So there was a big push at one point for disability euphemisms to be used, and so we're still seeing and experiencing that. But within the disability culture, meaning people who have disabilities, there's a general push away from using these euphemisms and actually using the term disability or disabled instead, which kind of goes back to that. There's nothing wrong with it, so why are we trying to not use this word in the first place? But yes, that doesn't mean that everybody has caught up to that.
Yeah, I sort of just curious wondering, but
Yes.
when you're talking about pushing back and you're talking about writing like research articles, the way that like some EDI research article will include statements of identity or these kinds of things, I think that it might be useful when we're deciding what language to use in our research articles to put why, so that if like have an explicit statement of this is the kind of language I'm using it, this is why I'm using it, and this is why I'm choosing not to use special needs or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think being really explicit about that is a way to push back.
Yeah, and hopefully like push the needle a little bit
Yeah, I
too.
agree.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, it's so interesting how, more than anything, it's just interesting how it's changed.
Mm-hmm.
No, don't use this term, now use this term,
Yes,
go back.
Yeah.
It's
And
like,
who's the
make sure
authority,
that I,
you know?
yes, exactly, which is where that was part of my point earlier. And like, we do actually need to talk about where these words came from in the first place, because if we're not doing that, then we're just changing words and we're rolling the meaning or the bias that was behind it in the first place right on into the future, which isn't helping anyone. Like handicapable, one, I don't even know what that means. Like, it doesn't actually make any sense. But the word handicap was like, there's a couple different potential origin stories for it. One is that it refers to someone who has their hand in cap, which is someone who's a beggar, right? They're on the streets. They are asking for money. They're left to the charity of others in order to survive. That's one possible origin. Or used to handicap the faster horses in horse racing to slow them down. And so then there's this idea of a person with a disability is handicapped in the race for life.
Also, the application in the race world came before its application in
Yes.
the human world.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's still a term that's used in golf today too,
It's
but
still using horse.
it's still used in the horse world too. Either of those definitions don't speak positively towards someone with a disability. It very much perpetuates this idea that you're left at the mercy of others, you're slowed down, you're disadvantaged, you're less fortunate, all of these things. So even if we decide, okay, we're not using the word handicap, but then we're like, let's just make it sound nicer by saying handicapable, like that, we're not addressing the root of the problem here. Or same with special needs, like a lot of times the connotation behind special needs still is that like pitying, you're less fortunate, you need extra help. I'm I'm non-disabled, so I'm here to help you, and then I'm the benevolent person who's taking pity on, like, there's still a lot of that connotation that gets attached to it. Differently abled is something that I also feel like I don't super understand that. Because if you're talking about humanity as a whole, each person has different limitations and different abilities. Same with special needs. Each person has needs. So then what makes a need, and then a need a special need? What makes an ability, and then a different ability? Like, it just becomes polarizing and othering. And I don't think it actually makes a lot of sense. So for me, in my own language, it's morphed. For me, like initially, I was like, okay, we're using, and this was from the beginning of Chez Jeunesse, it's like we're using disability and hiring people with disabilities. But I recognized I was only clarifying when I was talking about someone with a disability. And so that's been a recent switch for me of if a clarifier is needed, and oftentimes it's not, but if it is needed, then actually saying like 50% of my staff have disabilities and 50% of my staff is non-disabled. Instead of just saying 50% of my staff have a disability and then not mentioning the other 50%, like that there's an equality in that. We're saying I'm a non-disabled person and I'm working to break down my bias around disability. I'm not just going to say I'm a person who's working to break down my bias around disability, because then that points back to this idea that a person without a disability is the norm or the standard, and anything outside of that is abnormal. So that's been helpful for me to just practice that, to break that down within myself of, okay, I'm not the norm and there's something abnormal outside of that. It's truly, again, just a clarifier or an identity statement. I'm a non-disabled person. This may be a disabled person. And there's not really any harm in saying either one of those things, but it's also not always needed either.
So before we move on from this,
Sure.
one of my takeaways from the book
Yeah.
was this is still a very individualistic choice.
Yes.
And some people have owned or claimed some of these youth commitments.
Sure.
And so it's a matter of asking for personal choice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
The word cripple was brought up in the reading. The mother of the author had claimed the word cripple.
Yes.
And she was okay with it.
Yes.
But that's her.
Yes, exactly. And there's actually, I don't know if you all have been to the exhibit at the Weatherspoon Art Museum yet that they're doing this fall, but it's called CRIP and it's all centered around disability. If you haven't checked it out yet, they just did their open house on the weekend and I went and walked through it and it's very interesting. And I've been talking with their staff over there too. And so it's been really neat to hear their process and what they're learning. But it, if you kind of go through and you can interact with it as much or as little as you want to, but I would definitely encourage like reading and or listening to each of the descriptions at the exhibit. It's really interesting, but there has been some push in the disability world too, I think, to like take back or reclaim some words that have been derogatory in the past, but that gets to be that person's decision. As a non-disabled person, I wouldn't use it or put that on someone. Like if they decide to self-identify that way, that's one thing. And the same with some of these, like there are people with disabilities who will prefer to say that they have special needs. And if that's the case, and that's what they prefer, and that's what makes them feel respected and safe and comfortable, then by all means, go with it. There is a difference also in saying someone has special needs and someone is special needs. So don't say someone is special needs, but if someone says that they have special needs and that's how they like to identify, then it's totally fine for you to do that with them too. And that goes back to someone's own preference around language, but it's helpful to just have an understanding of it as a whole. Other questions or thoughts about that before we keep going? Okay. So far, I'm going to just do a quick check-in and recap. What are some of the biases around disability that you have learned or that have been amplified for you today? Through mostly, we've been talking about language.
Going back to the slide where you had like identity first
Mhm.
person.
Yeah.
My impression just reading that was like, Identity-based first person is more like, from my perspective, is more biased
Huh?
against, and probably not recommended
Mm-hmm.
addressing, somebody with disability, or even talking about
Yeah,
people with disability. I mean, I don't know. I mean, my personal opinion is like, it feels a bit more biased when it is negative,
mm-hmm,
right?
yeah,
But you could also have the opposite, when somebody is, let's say, smart person, right? A genius, so it's like you are qualifying that person. You're not saying a person who is a genius,
yeah,
all right? So when it is negative, it tends to resonate a bit more like bias against, right? And maybe we're talking about in very positive terms, then it may work. So,
yeah. I think the bias that they are culturally right is that there is something negative or there is something wrong with disability. And so breaking that bias that like, yes, people do hold that bias, but that means it's not actually true. Like that's an unfair statement to have, or not a like accurate understanding or impression of something to hold. So yes, we are a lot of times biased positively or negatively towards something, but I do agree with you. Usually when we think bias, we think negative, but we have positive biases too. And a distinction there would be oftentimes our culture, we're biased positively to think that a non-disabled person is more capable and a disabled person is less capable. And we can often, I think it's easier to identify that we might be negatively biased towards someone than it is to recognize how we're actually also being positively biased towards something. And that also isn't necessarily true. Like people ask me a lot, it's like, well, how do you train people with disabilities? And I'm like, I train them the way that I train people, like, because that's who they are. Like they're people, there's this, or isn't it hard to employ people with disabilities? I'm like, you're making it sound like it's easy to employ people without disabilities. Like non-disabled humans can be really challenging to employ. Like there's the scope of humanity, right, is so big, and that shows up differently in each person, that being a leader of people has its own like hurdles and beauty and messiness and wonderful, like there's such a spectrum of things that you experience. But it's not intrinsically tied to a disability or not, like it's really based on the person. And so kind of being able to zoom out and see a little bit of that broader picture. But it's interesting how much in society we perceive that to be the case. Oh, it's easy and just an automatic slam dunk if you hire someone without a disability, and it's automatically hard or challenging to hire someone with a disability when that's not true. Yeah. What else? What are some of the other biases that we've encountered so far today?
I think for me, one of the biases that since we started reading this book that I've been thinking about is I make an assumption that people would rather not have things pointed out about them. So, for example, I would never feel comfortable saying, I'm just going to choose an example. I'm not saying this about anybody, but I'm a fat woman. But I know women and men who are perfectly fine. And so and maybe this is generational a little bit, because I think back in the day, you were trying to be polite by not pointing out things about other people that you thought might make them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But with younger people, they don't seem to have those kinds of sort of more secretive. They're good with sharing and telling you who they are, and there's so it's. And underlying that is the bias. That's a bad thing that you're trying to skirt around.
Yes.
But even still, even above that, I think older generations, we were more secretive about everything about us.
Yes.
Whether they were good or bad.
Yeah, sure. I think that can be true. And it also, I think in terms of disability, it's not something that has to be pointed out. Like, I wouldn't walk up to someone and be like, you seem like you're autistic. Like, that's completely inappropriate. And why would I do that? Like, that's not, but if someone tells me, oh, I'm autistic, then I might then ask some other questions in an attempt to get to know the person. Like, what's that like for you? Tell me about your autism if you would like to. Like, there's room to get to engage and get to know a person, but they get to be the one to initiate that. And then oftentimes, like, I have a very neurodiverse team. We talked about it some, but most of the time, I mean, it really is just, we're talking about life, and sometimes just naturally, because disability or not is part of life, that will come into conversation. But more often than not, it's really just getting to know the person and the things that they like and the things that they don't like, and their goals and their dreams and their music and tastes, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff that you do with any other coworker. And so that part is fun. Like, we get to have some conversations that we might not otherwise. But yeah, it's not something that's pointed out unless there's a character. Like, I'll affirm character traits that I really like in people on my team. And again, that's not specific to disability, but I could, you know, that's a pointing out that I feel like is appropriate regardless. I love the way that you are so sensitive towards other people. Like, that's something that I really appreciate about you. And I try to make it more of like that being a character. I love that you like your taste for fashion and the way that you love to be creative and the way that you dress. Like, it's not necessarily saying like, I'm talking about your body as something that you do in the world.
And I didn't,
you interact with other people.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. And I didn't mean to suggest that I would go pointing out things to people. I think what I'm thinking of is when people are really upfront about it, it can be uncomfortable because you're like, oh, I don't like to talk about these things.
Yeah.
So it's just learning to be okay with, hey, this is out in the open.
Sure.
This person's really frank about it.
Yes.
That learning, that openness is something that I have to learn, not to be sort of uncomfortable with, oh, well, oh, no, you're not a fat woman. You know what I mean?
Not trying to like diminish something that someone doesn't need to have diminished.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I love that distinction. And sometimes it is awkward and uncomfortable because we don't do that a lot culturally. So it is a learning experience. And that's something that I just encourage y'all, and it's okay to name the awkwardness and the discomfort too. Like, we don't have to then pretend like it's not there. Be like, oh, sorry, I felt myself getting really uncomfortable for some reason. Like, but I would love to actually hear more about what you have to say. Like, it's okay to say that and to not then just be like, I'm just going to be super awkward and try to pretend like I'm not. Like, I'll tell guests, there are days when I'm like in my admin mode in the back, and then I'll come out and someone catches me in, you know, a service capacity. And then I'm like, I'm really awkward right now. I'm sorry. Like, you know, because it's like, I just couldn't switch fast enough. And I found it's just easier to say it and name it for what it is. And then be like, okay, we're going to move on. Sorry for what it was. Like, and it's okay. I think there's a lot of forgiveness that I have found to be the case when humans actually get to be humans with each other and you're not trying to perform all of the time.
I think too, in dealing with children my entire life, they get along and they're more comfortable with it than the adults were.
Yes.
It's not as much about the child who, you know, is dealing with something. It's about the other people who are like, I don't know how to act, so I'm just gonna go away.
Yeah.
So it's about us informing ourselves.
Yes.
And just getting experience and being open.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's about relationship.
Yes.
Building that relationship, getting to know those people.
Yeah.
Those people. Getting to know others.
Yeah, exactly.
And their experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So as we kind of head towards the back part of this session, I'm going to go over just a couple of buzzwords that are oftentimes used to define them. And then also we can talk a little bit more about what that looks like on a practical level. So inclusion, the definition that we use at Chez Jeunesse is a place to belong, others brought into the center and heartbeat, acceptance just as you are. There's a lot of different components to that. And the things that I'm saying and the things that I'll continue to say throughout this session, I think oftentimes can sound a little bit idyllic. and it can sound like, oh, it's just this easy thing. We just include people. It's hard work because, not so much because of the people, it's hard work for me because of all the internal work that I have to do to take care of my emotions and to be able to show up in a space where I'm safe with myself so that I can provide safety for other people. That I'm taking care of myself outside of work so that I have something left to give when I'm there, that my fuse isn't short. So that I have creative energy and I have the space to think outside the box and to be open to other people's ideas and to be secure in myself so that my defenses don't go up when people have feedback for me. Like all of those things are things that take commitment and they take time and they take compassion towards myself and then towards other people in order to actually facilitate an environment where inclusion can happen. But a big component of that for me and for my team is taking delight in each person and really getting to enjoy who each person is. So that kind of takes it a step further than just acceptance. Like, it's fine for you to be here. And instead be like, I really like having you here and I really like you. And these are things that I really like about you. And like seeing that, one, we're more the same than we are different, right? But also there are differences, and being able to celebrate those and be like, you saw something in this that I never would have seen. I love the way your brain works. That's so cool. Like, thanks for pointing that out and sharing that with me. Or people on my team solving problems in ways that I'm like, I never would have thought of that. Like, it's great that you're thinking in a totally different space and you're thinking about that because your life experience is different than mine. Like, so you're having to think about it in a different way. And that can be just a really cool thing to bring together. And then adaptability, reasonable accommodations that point back for us to our mission and identity, which means we work to provide accommodations for our team as they're needed, but that still needs to support the business as a whole too, because we are a business. We are not a nonprofit. We need our team to show up to work. We need our team to do a good job. And we need customers to come in in order for us to survive. We need them to come back. So if we're making an accommodation, it still needs to support the financial needs that the business has, and also our mission and identity. So some like easy examples of that are someone walks in, they want a Southern diner breakfast. Like, we don't do that. We're a French inspired cafe. I'm not going to change my menu or make something up on the fly to satisfy what you would like, but I'm happy to refer you to another place in town that would be able to give you that breakfast. But if someone comes in and they say, I have a nut allergy, I'm going to accommodate that allergy with something that's already on my menu and with the space that we have. For our team, we learned really early on, a good percentage of my team takes public transportation to work. And oftentimes the bus schedule doesn't totally line up with the work schedule. And we're downtown so that we're close to the bus route, which is really helpful. Sometimes people get to work an hour and a half early because that's when the bus got them there. And so initially we had people who were like, well, can I clock in? I'm here. And we quickly realized, like, to let all of you clock in when you get here means my labor costs are going to go up significantly. And I don't actually need the labor right now. Like, we had it staggered for a reason. So instead, we have an area for our staff to hang out in if they get there early. It's safe, it's comfortable, it's also out of the work path so that we're not distracting each other, because that happens too sometimes. So then it's like, I'm accommodating a need that you have. You need a place to be if you get here early, but I'm also not increasing my labor costs or creating distractions or roadblocks in our work area by you being here early. So those are some simple ways that we do that. There's a lot of different ways that shows up. And then self-advocacy, we've said already, disclosure is a person's personal decision. We don't force disclosure. We thank someone if they do disclose. But then self-advocacy, we're going to go over just briefly what it is and what it isn't. Self-advocacy can be for every person, whether you have a disability or not, I highly encourage it. But sharing your goals and desires, asking for help when needed, sharing ways that your coworkers, your friends, and our boss could support you, knowing your resources and your rights, disclosing your disability if you have one, asking for reasonable accommodations, setting and establishing boundaries, sharing emotions and feelings. Those are all things that can fall under the self-advocacy category. Sometimes that may look like a big thing where someone's actually setting aside a meeting or time to talk about something. A lot of times that can happen if you're practicing it in just very practical and organic ways throughout the day. Someone comes up to me and they're like, oh, can I tell you something? And I'm like, is it about work? No, I'm like, then yes, but later. I'm busy right now. I need to focus on what I'm doing. Like, that's a moment of me practicing self-advocacy. Like, I need to be able to stay focused. And I will break that focus if what you're telling me is more pressing. But if it's not, then I'm actually going to have you wait. So there's a lot of different ways that we practice that just kind of in the moment. Or someone saying, I really, my blood sugar is dropping. Can I go grab a snack real fast? This is where my tables are at. And it's like, sure, absolutely. Like, they're taking care of that need for themselves. Self-advocacy is not focusing only on your preferences, requesting what is easier for you, attempting to get out of your responsibilities, or using it as an excuse to complain about other people. So, all of that being said, I'm here for the next 30 minutes, and I would like, if you want, to use that time to dig into maybe some specific questions that you have, because a lot of the concepts that you brought up at the beginning of this session, some of them we've already touched on, but some of them probably are going to be very specific and not something that's super generalized. So as we kind of go through this last little bit, would love to dig into some of the more specific questions that you have.
Before the questions, are we gonna get to see that letter?
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, let's do that. I actually forget to do this almost every time I leave this workshop. So I'm glad
I
you did
really
that.
was, it was
You
like.
can share.
Okay.
You can share.
You want to share?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll share.
Great.
I love it.
Okay, so as you can see,
This is the letter that was sent to her and it had like, this is the language.
this is from 2023, so
Because it was squished.
it's not an ancient thing. What I want you to do with this, okay, thanks so much for reading. Take a look at it, mark it up, highlight it, write things that you're like, that doesn't feel right. If you have suggestions of how to reframe things, you can write those down too. And then we'll talk about it. Thank you, Heather. I would have totally breezed past that.
I really wanted to see. Let's move on.
And become a resource in every workshop that I teach.
Yeah, especially with the
I will also say that it is not particularly well written, just in general. There are some sentences where it's like, I don't think that makes sense. So some of that doesn't have to do with disability language at all. Some of it is just the person who wrote it didn't edit it, but there also are some disability specific things.
There's a funny typo that says lie affirming.
Yes,
instead
yeah,
of
I mean, that's what
This is lie affirming.
Yeah, what do you think it's supposed to be?
Like,
I think it's much better. Yeah,
I was struggling with that. I was like,
yeah, slightly different.
What are they trying to?
what are they trying to?
Birthdays in 2023, maybe lie affirming makes you joyous.
That does not make. The fact that
It's just the opposite.
Did everybody make it through?
Yeah.
what are some of the things you noticed?
Are they athletes? Partner.
Yes, okay, that's a big one, right? Quotation marks. What do those quotation marks imply?
They're not real.
They're not really an athlete, right? An athlete, yes, exactly,
I just watched the Paralympics. I mean,
yes, athlete.
they're athletes.
No quotation marks needed, right? An athlete is an athlete, disability or not. It's also fun fact about the Olympics. There's 3 different Olympics,
Of the
right?
main paragraph, intellectual disabilities, under competition, high functioning.
High functioning, yes.
And I'm not going, I will be quick to admit that I've used the term high functioning because that is a term used for autism for years.
It was used
Yeah.
a lot, yeah, high functioning or low functioning. Which I think the understanding of the autism spectrum is changing too, which is,
The definition was broad,
Really
broader than the last DSM.
yeah.
Language changed in the diagnostic and statistic.
Yes, I think some of the things that I've seen, that a lot of times, like when we think about a spectrum, we do think about a straight line. And so if you have high functioning on one side and low functioning on the other, then we're kind of like scaling back and forth between this line. Instead of, my sister sent me something where someone was actually using the burners, like the dials on her oven, to demonstrate a spectrum instead. And like if each dial represented something else, then it's like, this one might be turned up this much, this one might be turned all the way here, this one might be here, like, when you're thinking of a spectrum, there's a range within a range too, like, it's not just this linear thing, and that's been really helpful for me to think of it that way too, but it doesn't automatically place someone in a level of functioning, because there's so many different components to the person, and so it's like, my emotional intelligence may be dialed really high, and maybe my sensory capacity is low, like, but that doesn't mean that someone's high functioning or low functioning. It's just kind of more nuanced.
And autism has been a pot of which has been a label for ages.
Yeah.
My mom worked at Gateway here in Greenville.
Okay.
And so you would have folks who are nonverbal.
Yes.
And you would also have folks who, students in my school who, had a 130 IQ.
Right.
All still on the spectrum.
Yes.
Just a wide range of ability.
Yes. Yeah. So we can just remove the quotation marks altogether, right? Don't need them. The high functioning athletes capable of playing independently. I don't really know that you need that at all, to be honest.
Just saying.
Because they're not gonna play independently, they're gonna be on a team.
Yes, also, yeah, that's true.
I was trying to figure out what that meant.
And
Yeah.
they're gonna have partners, right? I don't know.
There's also, I think, this like generalized tone in this letter that like, we have athletes with disabilities who are playing on this team, so we're not really about the sport and about the competition. It's more just to be life affirming, like it's for fun. And that I think too is diminishing to the athletes who are actually playing, and also the competitive desire or abilities that they may hold. And kind of it's taking that away, or just assuming you're not here to win, you're just here to feel good about playing the sport.
So maybe lie affirming's not too far.
Maybe so. Yeah, but a lot of these things, it's like we're clarifying things that don't actually need to be clarified. Like if you're saying competition, athletes. I don't need to say high functioning athlete capable of playing independently. Like athlete should be all encompassing to anything else that they just clarified in that sentence. So anything else on here? Do you wanna?
I can't help but reflect on a documentary I saw a few months ago, Life of Oscar Pistorius.
Okay.
Who we know is a complicated human, has got a couple life stories, but it was focusing on his fight to get into the 2012 London Olympics. And his father looked at an interviewer, and during that phase in time, he looked at the interviewer and said, he's not disabled. Given the appropriate technology.
Yeah.
He was keeping up, time-wise.
Yeah.
With other athletes. And so they were just really, that fight at 2012 to get him into the London Olympics centered on this tech advantage. that his tech was giving him a greater advantage than other athletes. They're athletes.
Yes.
They're just
Yes.
athletes.
And there's also, I think that's such a fascinating, we can really go down the rabbit hole on that.
But I
It's
didn't-
very fascinating. No, I love that. There's, it's like you can't, I feel like the way we've staged things in terms of athletic competitions in the world, it's like disabled athletes can't win, is kind of the way we structured it, where it's like, no, you have to have, we don't think you're as good as a non-disabled athlete. And then when you prove that you are, we're gonna claim that it was something else that made you that good. Like, there's not an actual acceptance of the person and what their ability is. And that feels like such, I would imagine, at least such a defeating place to try to be in, where it's like, so you're telling me I can't do it, and then when I tell you I can, and I show you that I can, you're telling me that it was something else that must have made me be able to do that. Like, it does very much feel like you're just trying to keep people down.
There were also,
Really
hopefully I'm not repeating anything, because I was looking at the letter again. There was also a situation of this time around, a few folks that apparently, one was in an accident, so that wasn't truly the same. There was one athlete who was competing, so not disabled enough.
Yeah.
So there was that as well.
Yeah.
At least in
Yeah.
a couple of situations.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like.
The one who got bitten by a shark, I mean,
Mm.
you know, I'm sorry, but that changed your life forever.
You know, so you go back to that ADA definition, right? Like, that totally fits under that description.
There was even, so it's, all the way up. And-
Yeah.
At the same time, just a question. Violate that very right to spectrum, business spectrum, or.
Yeah.
In a range. And so I'm talking about same thing, range in a range, and so what the different disabled, do it similar disability, but at different levels.
Sure. Yeah.
So again, it goes back to those definitions, like Olympics and how people can complete certain areas, depending on
Yeah.
their abilities, so. Some may, I don't know how to call it, but different advantages because of the range that you might be in terms of the disability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, it's a complicated issue, the rabbit issue, but I don't want to get into.
Yes.
There are those issues too.
Yes. But that probably also occurs within non-disabled athletes as well. They're just not as visible, so we don't maybe talk about it as much. But yes, I agree with that. I somehow should either shut this off, or I don't know if I clicked it.
We'll get there.
Okay. I know, I like, this is why I don't like doing my own. But there are 3 different Olympics, just a fun Olympics fact over here. So there's the Olympics, which is for non-disabled athletes. There's the Paralympics, which is for athletes with physical disabilities. And then there's the Special Olympics, which is for athletes with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the Paralympics is called the Paralympics because it runs side by side in timeline of the Olympics. Oh, thank you so much for pulling that back up. Okay, questions, things that you're curious about or that you want to dig into here as we close out.
Yeah, can I ask you about your hiring process?
Sure.
So, because you said people don't have to disclose.
Yep.
So, so somebody comes in
Mhm.
and they're applying for a job.
Yep.
Do you, know that they're being referred by a vocational rehab person or something? Do you have prior knowledge, or are you just dealing with the person as they are right in front of them?
Yeah, both happen. We do view each applicant as their own individual applicant, and disclosure has kind of run the gamut on applicants that we've had in the past. So some people are very upfront about it and they disclose as they're asking for an application. We have people who will disclose on their application. Sometimes people will in the interview. Sometimes people 6 months into hiring, sometimes people don't disclose at all. And it's like, I think maybe you have a disability, but you've never said so. We're not talking about it and I'm not going to assume that you do. Like, so there's been a range. Oftentimes, if someone is being referred through another program or another agency, that is communicated upfront because sometimes they have specific things that they have to do through that agency with their employment. And so they're usually pretty honest about that. Like, I have a job coach who would come with me, or I can only work X number of hours a week before I start losing some of my services or some of my funding from the government or things like that. So if it's something that feels like it's important for us to know in terms of what the logistics of their employment look like, people are usually pretty upfront about that. I do really encourage the applicant, like the person who wants to work with us, to be the one who's doing the work of asking for the application, filling it out, doing the interview. I had someone this week who was through another agency, and it was the agency that kept reaching out. And I wrote back and I was like, I would really like to hear from the applicant. Like, I emailed the applicant directly and just copied the agency and was like, hi, I would really love to know, like, if you're interested in this position. And then the agency emailed me back and was like, really interested in the position. And I was like, I was really hoping to hear from them.
Because you all are coming to work.
Yes, and like said specifically, it's actually discouraging me from hiring this person because something that I look for is initiative and motivation. And if they're not doing any of the work to get this job, then that's not showing me that they have the initiative and the motivation, that they actually want to work here. So, or sometimes parents, my son really, like, I really want my son to work here. I'm like, well, does your son want to work here? Because he's not asking to work here. Is he not going to be a good fit? So yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that we do too.
On that note. Yeah. We had volunteers with, disabilities.
Yeah.
And some of them worked out really, really well. They were very independent. And then other times it was more so if one of us was not with that individual.
Yep.
Or if their life coach wasn't with them.
Right.
They weren't able to accomplish the task.
Yep.
And so it became a break, or it became a burden.
Yeah.
On the staff. So how do you come across that with a member of your team, and how do you have that like, what type of conversations have you had with them to encourage either A, growth, or B, this is it working out?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. I will say that bridge is beyond just employees with disabilities.
Yeah.
Those are conversations that I've had with teammates with disabilities and without, where it's like, hey, this is what the job is. This is what I need to see from you. In general, we're pretty open to hiring people who don't have previous restaurant experience and teaching them those skills on the job. But there is a threshold of like, this is the job that we need. And if in a given period of time, you're not at a place where you're showing that you're committed, or you're taking responsibility, or you're achieving the skills that you're setting out to achieve, then I can't just hold that spot for you indefinitely. Like, we need to make room for somebody else. Again, we're a business. I need to have a team do their tasks in order for us to still be a business. So that obviously there's an emotional side of that too. It's not as cut and dry as just being like, hey, it wasn't a great fit, because I do care about people. And when you're looking across from a person and you're trying to communicate that can be hard. But that is something that I try to be upfront about at the beginning, like what we actually need and what the role is. And then sometimes we're in a position where we can take someone on our team who may need either additional support or who really doesn't have any experience, and we're training them from the ground up. And other times it's like, no, we really need someone who can step in and just take off running. Like, we're looking for someone who has previous experience. It sometimes depends on where the business is at and what the role is. But I do think that there's equality and then there's exceptionalism. And oftentimes within disability employment or education, we make exceptions for people with disabilities. We don't hold them to the same standard or the same expectations. And so what we're trying to do is saying, it's equal. I expect the same thing from you and I'm holding everyone on my team to the same standard. If you need an accommodation to assist you in meeting that standard, I'm happy to provide the accommodation. I'm not going to change what the standard is. If you're a server, you need to be a server, which means you need to be able to take orders at the table. You need to be able to put them into our system. You need to be able to check in with your tables and run food. Like, those are some of the basics. Do you need a different way to take orders? We can totally accommodate that. Do you need a cart or a tray to take food to the table instead of carrying it by hand? We can totally do that. Like, there's a lot of different adaptations that we can make, but the basic mechanics of the job still have to be done. I haven't found job coaches to be particularly helpful. In my experience, a lot of times that ends up being an extra person to take care of. A lot of times where I'm like, you're not doing anything, but you don't work for me, and I don't know how to communicate to you that you're not really being helpful right now. So that's a whole different kind of host of issues. But sometimes someone having a coach I don't think lets a person achieve the full potential that they have, because they're used to relying on someone else or someone else coming behind them and externally motivating instead of teaching that internal motivation. And that's hard to do. And I think that starts earlier than when someone's getting a job, but those are some of the things that I look at.
So, you have built a location that has standards and expectations with accommodations to help them reach that. We are a program that, we have advocacy very much woven into, and a wide range of advocacy.
Yes.
Advocacy for reading, banned books, censorship, equity, diversity. I mean, we got a lot of ranges of advocacy, but also how do we, what kind of language and what kind of recommendations? I mean, we have some, but even more, what kind of recommendations can we give our students as they go out into the field and go into places where the accommodations may not be, or they may have directors who have no clue, or are just not interested or willing, and planning on taking that, reactive idea of, nothing's ever happened before, or, but we haven't been sued, or, this nonsense. And instead of making it, again, it doesn't, you don't have to change the world, but you don't have to change everything, but our students understand what is expected of the job. They understand what the standards and expectations are.
Yes.
But there may need to be some items that are changed.
Yes.
We had a student who was in a wheelchair, is in a wheelchair. There were steps in the library.
Yeah.
So I mean, how can we help them to have the tools to advocate for themselves?
Yeah.
Because that, for a program that can be real introvert leaning heavy, how, address it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great questions. So I would say communicating to your students that disclosure is their decision can be really empowering, that they get to decide what their story is and how they want to tell it, who they want to tell it to. Using interviews with other companies and jobs as an opportunity to interview them too, and to, if you can, I think that's an appropriate place to test some things out. That doesn't have to be extreme, but I think it's important to cue, like, is this a work environment where you would feel safe? Is this a work environment where you feel respected? Maybe practice asking for a simple accommodation through that interview process and see how someone responds. Might give you an indication of how welcoming or how accommodating they would be if you got a job there. I know that it's hard because oftentimes the positions that are being offered to people with disabilities are fewer. And so it may kind of feel like, well, this is the only job I'm getting offered, so I want to take it. And if that's the case, I think that there could be some level of strategy I'm going to get in the door. I'm going to plan to work here for X period of time. I'm going to try to get this experience. I'm going to use that to move on somewhere, like being strategic.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling like I'm going to be stuck here forever, obviously, and then knowing your rights and your resources too is also really helpful. But accommodations could be requested verbally, that could be something that's written. So whichever form of communication someone's more comfortable with is really appropriate. Yeah, and I think that that can look like a lot of different things, but being willing to trust yourself in that process too. Does this feel like it would be a good fit for you? Instead of just getting into a situation that could be really harmful. Which again, there's so much more nuance to that because it's an unjust hiring process in the world. But I do think feeling like you can go into it with some sort of sense of empowerment and knowledge about what your rights and resources are, and then maybe what you would already want to see for yourself in a job and have that in mind, is also really helpful.
Yeah.
I think you can.
Identifying what you need.
Yes.
To meet the standard is hard for disabled and non-disabled people
Yeah.
to identify and like self-advocate for that. So like going in and kind of knowing what accommodations or support that you need.
Yeah.
Hard.
And sometimes that may mean that it's not the right job fit, right? And that doesn't mean it's not because you're a good candidate or because the business isn't a good business. Like I had someone this week who applied for a job and I was like, I'm looking specifically for a weekend position. And they were like, I can't work on weekends. I can only work during the weekdays. And I was like, then we're not a fit for each other, but it doesn't have anything to do with disability or not, or whether you're a great person or not, or whether we're a good business. It's like, it just, what you needed isn't what I need. So it's just not a fit. Like sometimes that happens too. But I think there's a lot, in terms of accommodations, there's a lot more room for people to accommodate. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do on the business side of things, is that accommodations aren't as hard as people think they are. It just takes a little bit of creativity and the willingness to actually think something through and make an action and take action on it. But a lot of the accommodations we provide are actually very simple in process and don't cost a lot of money. And so it could be a lot more common practice within businesses than I think it is.
Along the way, and you made this point, I think folks forget that they're interviewing you, but you are interviewing them. And, it's okay to ask the hard questions.
Yeah.
I mean, folks need to know what the budget is. If you're in a school library
Right.
and you're the one who's gonna be running the budget, and if it's zero, well then, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Book, bake sales and book fairs. It's like you shouldn't have to raise that kind of money.
Yeah.
And so, but there's all kinds of hard questions that you may have to ask,
Yes.
whatever they may be.
Yeah.
And they may not be as hard as you think.
Yes.
I just really appreciate that when you said, people ask me if it's difficult, like it's like managing non-disabled people isn't difficult.
Right.
And that really got me thinking about what I think my central role as like a leader is knowing what everyone is really good at and knowing what their weaknesses are and trying to help them minimize the impact of their weaknesses while they maximize the effect of their gifts. And whatever work assignments they get, hopefully those work assignments really can work with that.
Yeah.
And so if we can teach our students to think really critically about what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, regardless of whether that's related to disability or not,
Sure.
it's the same process.
Yeah.
And what do I need to manage my weaknesses in the job so that I can be as effective as possible? It just sort of normalizes the whole thing. It's not something completely different.
Yeah.
I make accommodations for people who really prefer not to be in the circumstance or prefer not to do this kind of work. It's not comfortable for them. And that's really, it just sort of creates a spectrum of thinking about how to suit the business needs to the needs of the individual and how to maximize that relationship.
Yes.
Really is the same thing.
Yes.
That was very helpful for me in my brain.
There is, right, like, you're looking at American history. The Industrial Revolution changed a lot of things in terms of our work, but we did culturally stop viewing employees as people and we needed them to be machines, right? Like, I need you to be efficient. I need you to be effective. I need you to not make any mistakes. I need all these things. And so you stop seeing someone as an individual and it's like, you're just a number on a spreadsheet. You're just data, you're whatever it is. And so we really culturally highly value efficiency and productivity and have the bias that people with disabilities are not productive or efficient. And so there's not a place for them in our workplace, right? Because we're trying to be productive and we're trying to be efficient, and naturally you can't be those things. That isn't true. And there's also more to being a person and more to being an employee than just being productive and efficient and just being a number on a spreadsheet. And so I think there's a lot of benefit to being able to stop and pause and be like, I see you for who you are. And I see that these are things you're really good at. These are things that may stress you out at work. These are some of your goals and these are some of your dreams. These are my goals and dreams as a business. These are things that I need. How can we partner together? But there's actually some of that give and take instead of just forcing everyone to try to be the same. And so I think we see that line of thinking in the hesitation that people oftentimes have when hiring people with disabilities, and that is unfair. And then people miss out. Like, there's a large percentage of the population that's disabled, and there's a large percentage of the disabled population that's unemployed. You have almost a quarter of US citizens have a disability, and 60 to 70% of them don't have a job. It's like, that's a lot of people. And there's a lot of people with disabilities who could be part of the workforce and aren't welcomed in. And that is a missed opportunity on a lot of different levels. So. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My contact information if you want it. And then if you want to follow us on Instagram, this is where we do like restaurant updates. So that's the QR code for that. And then we have a YouTube too. So if you want to follow that, that's the QR code for that. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you've a lot of experience about managing a difficult team.